they just spawn on the field.
Yeah, it would be nice if they put a tower up there.
Her fault, because they were French Valley's
For real?
Then you take a check.
French Valley's getting a tower in December, and he was getting
Hello,
radar.
everybody.
About that, I was just looking at ForeFlight myself.
I will make sure the screen sharing
It has a
is
tower
right.
frequency.
That'd be nice if
They're
they.
starting to get one, because it's, they saw the operations and they see
It's like,
it.
like an SEC. The CEC type.
Oh, it looks like somebody on Drums, please confirm that you can see the slideshow.
Gotcha.
Okay, good. Okay, so we'll give maybe a minute of courtesy to those running late and we'll start. Are we live on YouTube? Good. Okay, while waiting, a quick introduction. So for those visiting, I'm Andrei Tikhonov. I'm Squadron 5 commander here at Riverside, Senior Squadron for Civil Air Patrol. And today we have a special guest, Mike Jesh. Mike, please come on over. Yes. So Mike is CFAA instructor and member of NAFI. And I'll let you speak for yourself. So please come forward in front of the camera.
In front of the camera. NAFI, SAFE, AOPA, EAA, all the alphabet groups. Multi-instructor, single instructor, and instrument instructor. And something else. Oh, airline pilot. my night job is I fly 787 to across the Pacific to Tokyo lately. Last couple of years, been anywhere I want to go as long as it's Tokyo for about the last 2 years. So I'm starting to find a way. It turns out if you take off out of LA, you just keep going straight, and eventually you get to Haneda. And that gives me lots of time off to stick with the little airplane stuff. And Andre and I met a couple of years ago, 3 years ago maybe. He was my passenger on the way to Oshkosh a few years ago. Brand new airplane owner, hadn't been there before, and I'd been there lots of times. I was looking for some self-loading freight to come with me along to Oshkosh, and he signed up, and turned out to have a great trip.
Yeah, I worked as an autopilot. Those servers.
Flew the airplane way better than my autopilot does, which doesn't work very well. So, yeah, so we got together, and he's been begging me for 4 years now, 3 years, whatever it's been, to come over and speak to you guys. One of the other things is I'm actually a former member of the Civil Air Patrol. I was at Squadron 56, adult squadron, senior squadron in 1984, so 40 years ago now. And I was the only flight instructor in the group, so I could do Form 5 rides. I never got mission qualified. I was only there for a year, and then I got an airline job and moved out. But I did participate in the California Wing sailplane program out at 29 Palms. I did some glider, some winch tows over at Los Alamitos. So, and then I got a real job, became a productive member of society, flying airliners around, and just don't have time to do it anymore, so. It's only taken 3 years to get hooked up over here.
Okay, good. Hopefully first time, not the last time. Okay, so let's do formal start of the meeting. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Father, thank you again for this day, for our teachings that we learned through Civil Air Patrol, for our guests to enjoy the camaraderie here. We also pray for Shirley and the John Meyer Fire family on his passing this past Sunday. He was a former squadron commander of Squadron 5. So we pray for that family, for their sorrows, Father. Be with us in our guidance. In your name we pray. Amen.
And before we do, sir,
What do you want to talk about?
let's talk about ForeFlight weather.
ForeFlight? Well, everybody already knows everything about ForeFlight, right? It's been around for, what, 10, 12 years, something like that?
You would think, right?
Yeah. Yeah, Andre asked me to give a talk about ForeFlight or give a talk on anything. And he said, what subject would you like to talk about? And I said, well, how about ForeFlight? Yeah, okay. There's a lot of stuff to know about ForeFlight. You can't possibly cover everything in an hour, let alone a week, probably. So I thought, let's focus it on one thing, and one of the things I think we probably don't take advantage of as much as we can is some of the weather features in ForeFlight. So that's a great place to start. We've only got an hour or so. We probably can't cover everything in an hour. So it's going to be kind of a sprint. And feel free to ask any questions along the way. I'll throw something out. If you've got a better way to do something, I'm all ears. I'm not an expert on this. Cody Reynolds, DPE, was just here a moment ago. I've talked with him in the past. He says especially when he does instrument check rides, probably one of the areas that pilots are weakest on is weather. And I count myself in that category. I've been flying almost 50 years. I don't understand weather as well as I could. And I venture a guess that you probably don't either. But what I do know is how to get the weather information out of here. So I'm going to talk about that mostly tonight. And I'll leave the weather theory stuff to other excellent instructors. Scott Denstedt comes to mind. If you ever get a chance to see a presentation by him, you'll understand a lot more about how the weather works. This is just about how you get this weather data out of ForeFlight. So having said that, a couple of caveats. I do not work for ForeFlight. They don't even know that I'm giving this presentation. I'm an amateur taught. I taught myself how to work it, kind of a self-defense measure as I work with my students. I've had 2 instrument students that I've had pass check rides on their first go. So I do it a lot. I fly a lot, a fair amount myself, both at work and at home. So I get into it a lot. And I'm always looking for new ways to get information out of the system. And so we'll talk about that. What I'm going to start with is, we've all heard, is it legal to use ForeFlight to get weather? So the question is, what does that legal mean? What does it mean to have legal weather? Do they want to venture a guess? What is legal weather? I'm putting big giant air quotes around that.
So where that actually registers that you actually got a weather brief?
That's the way I define it, is weather that has your tail number is associated with that data that you've got. And in ForeFlight, there's only one place to do that. So that place is, if you've got a flight plan in here, this is the flight plan I flew tonight to come over here. The only place you can do that from, and I meant to bring my USB mouse that would show you a big red dot on the map here. But at the bottom, across the bottom of the screen here is those tabs. If you take this flight plan and you send it over to the flights tab, and you're looking at this flight weather information here, or the flight plan information here, you tap in the upper in the middle of that briefing. This is the weather briefing that when you filed your flight plan, you got ready to file your flight plan, you tap this briefing, it sent your tail number into the ForeFlight computer system. They package your tail number, the time, date, the departure destination, a bunch of other data, and then they send you a bunch of stuff. And there's a record of that made. So if something were to happen on this flight, and I wrap it into a ball of aluminum on the end of the runway, the FAA, when they're investigating, trying to figure out what happened, they can go to ForeFlight and they can say, did you get a weather briefing? And ForeFlight will say, yes, they did, and here's the data that we sent them. So this is the legal weather briefing. There is an advisory circular on how to get a weather briefing. I actually have that in ForeFlight here too. See if I can find it quickly. I have a lot of folders that I keep things in. One of the advisory circulars down here is one on getting weather briefings. Here it is, AC 9192. I'm not going to read this to you. I just want to show it to you that this is the information from the FAA. If you're going to self-brief your flight, this is the kind of data that they would like to make sure that you make an effort to get. So this is the data that's included in that briefing. So download this document. You can download this document or any other document you want into ForeFlight and have it available when you're flying along. So back to our flight's briefing over here. There are 2 different forms that ForeFlight will give you a briefing in. They make a PDF briefing, or you can get an HTML briefing. This is the PDF version, and it starts out with a wind chart, and this is a side view of your flight. Your departure is always on the left, and your destination is always on the right. So even if you were flying from here to Santa Barbara, let's say, you're going to have Riverside on the left, and Santa Barbara on the right. So it's not east to west, it's departure to destination. So just make sure you're looking at it in the right order. The gray stuff there is the terrain within a distance of your flight. You see wind barbs in there, you see temperature barbs in there. This particular flight, I said I was going to fly at 3,000 feet. At the top level up here, you can see we have tropopause altitudes, which isn't going to matter for our little airplanes. If you're flying something that gets up into the 30s and 40s, then that might matter to you. Some of these briefings will have turbulence depicted on it. You'll see colored squares in there, and if you see the little color scale on the lower left of that diagram, that's your legend as to what those colors mean in terms of turbulence. So it's an eddy dissipation rate, which is a funky thing. Basically, the darker the color, the worse the turbulence is going to be. Next to that, if there was icing along the way, you see the little logos there for icing, shows you what that's going to look like. Continuing down, this is a top-down view of our flight. So if you're on the space station looking down, these are your wind barbs and temperatures and so forth. Continuing down, this is a view of the region here with areas of turbulence. And you see the dashed lines there indicate a region, and you can see this letter A. If there are multiple regions depicted on this chart, you're going to have a little section over here on the left that says region A is clear air turbulence, light turbulence from surface to 32,000. And it was kind of a little light shock when I flew over this afternoon. Sometimes you'll see these charts and there will be 2 or 3 different zones that might affect different regions. Just correlate the letters on the left to the diagram in the middle. You can see the jet stream there, a nice little 130 knot wind. If you were up in the altitude, if you're going southeastbound, that'd be really nice. If you're going northwestbound, it would really suck. It'd be a long trip. Then you got your weather. It's going to start with your departure weather and your destination weather. In this case, both airports have METARs available, but neither of them have a TAF available. So it picks the nearest TAF. So in my case, out of Fullerton, the nearest weather is Los Alamitos. Closest to here is Ontario. It gives you what it can find for you. Scrolling down a little bit more, it gives you en route airport weather. Long Beach is within a few miles of the route, so it's going to give me Long Beach. It's going to show Chino and Ontario in there. Also notice it gives me color-coded dots. These are really nice. A quick way to look at that and see, do I need to look into this weather a little bit more? Green is good weather. Blue is marginal VFR, a little bit less good. You can get into red for IFR and purple for low IFR, and that's when you really need to start paying attention. But even if you see just greens along there, you might want to take a look at that. For instance, that Ontario, the 4th bullet down there, it says the wind's going to be on the 27th at 0500. Wind will be variable at 4 knots, 6 or more miles visibility, but 2,000 feet scattered cloud layer. So that might be something, even though it's a green dot, that's a scattered layer, it's not a ceiling, that might be something I need to pay attention to. So the green is not necessarily a get out of jail free and you're good to go. You still need to pay attention to it. And we got SIGMETs, significant weather, no airmets today. Continuing down, we got our NOTAMs. Again, organized by departure airport to destination. And these are broken down into type of SIGMET, type of NOTAM. We've got standard instrument procedures. We've got departure, runway obstructions, service, and standard instrument procedures. So take a look through there. If you're not flying IFR, maybe you don't care about the approach procedures, SIDS, and STARS. But if you're a VFR pilot, maybe you do care about the obstruction lighting. Maybe you do care about NAVAs. Maybe, in our case there at Fullerton, there's a NOTAM. That top one on the runway, Fullerton runway 24, runway lead-in light system is inoperative. This one, people keep hitting it with airplanes. Talk to the airport manager. They put that light back up on this post 3 times, and 3 times it's been hit by an airplane. And it's short of the fence. It's across the street next to a railroad track. And it keeps getting hit. And so he's just kind of done with it. There's another one down here in the service that might
be interesting. It says under service, PCL runway 24 PAPI unserviceable, US. ForeFlight will filter some of these terms like US. That's a bad thing. Something isn't working. It's inoperative, so they make it red. Sometimes you see out of service, like in the SID entry there. Sometimes you see US, but in any case, it's not good. It's not working. In that case, it's not that the PAPI is out of service. It's that the PCL for the PAPI is out of service. The pilot-controlled lighting, part of it is out of service. The light works. It just doesn't turn off at night, and you click your button, and it doesn't turn it back on. So when the tower leaves for the night, they just leave it on all night. So if you're wondering why you click the thing and the PAPI doesn't turn on, it's because it was already on, because it's broken. So look through the NOTAMs, and again, there's a record of all this information that you were given this information. There's no record that you actually read the information, though. So this is where that AC comes into play, that, yeah, they give you the data, but you need to know how to read it and find what matters to you, and that just takes practice. If you have any questions on any of this, get with your instructor. Get a briefing, just read through it. You have to be careful what you ask for, though. If you remember about a year ago, they had a problem with the NOTAM system. The national NOTAM system went out of service. I was flying to Tokyo the next night, and I used the alternate system to get the NOTAMs for my LA to Tokyo flight. 140 pages of NOTAMs. It took all 12 hours of that flight to read them all. So you don't necessarily have to read every one. And personally, for myself, I like them in this encoded form with all the very short acronyms. I can read through that real quickly, and I can see what matters to me. If it was English language, it would take pages and pages and pages. Each one of those that's one line here would be 4 or 5 lines maybe in a decoded form. So it would be 4 or 5 times the number of pages I have to look through to see what I'm looking for. So I think it's more efficient and quick for me to go through the coded form. So I'm in favor of keeping it like this. So that's one form of briefing. The other form of briefing, the HTML type, I got another briefing, and it looks like this. You can select which type you want. It's one of the settings in ForeFlight. And if you get this type, you can see on the left is the elements of a standard briefing. It starts out with the adverse conditions, and then it goes down to temporary flight restrictions, closed and unsafe stuff, airmets. Scroll down here, synopsis, current weather, forecasts, and NOTAMs. That's the format. If you were to call a weather briefer and ask for a standard weather briefing, this is the order that they're going to give you this stuff in. So it's all the same data that a standard weather briefer is going to give you. And the way this works is, on the left-hand side in that center column, kind of in the beige color, is the encoded version of that, the very top line of this TFR. You see a picture of it, which is nice. Where the red circle is that TFR. This happens to be the Disneyland TFR. Lately I've been calling it a PFR. It's a permanent flight restriction. Nothing temporary about that one anymore, right? It's been there for 20 years. But you can see it in the context of the region and your route of flight. So I'm going away from the airport. I'm going to be talking to ATC when I'm there. That TFR is not going to matter to me a whole lot. But I also suggest, especially if we have a weird TFR, a sporting event TFR, or a presidential TFR, read the language of the TFR. They're different. It's not necessarily a no-fly zone. There are portions of it that are no-fly. There are other portions that you can fly in. But if you're going to fly in those portions, you need to know what the restrictions are. And it's all written right here. Scroll down here, and I hate that this is all capital letters. I feel like they're shouting at me, and none of it makes sense. And you have to weed through that to find what really matters. But the data's all there. Now, if you notice in the bottom of that center column there, it says next, turbulence high airmets. So this will walk you through the briefing. It's going to show you the next element of this briefing that's important to you. You tap that. It's going to take you to the turbulence high. So if you remember back in the other briefing, we saw that top-down map view that had the A region that was marked with the A. It said turbulence. That's this thing. So it's kind of a different way of looking at the same data. And it puts it in context of the region so you know where that turbulence is. You got the altitudes. The top of that's 39,000. The base is 18,000. So I'm flying my 182. It does okay at 10 or 11,000 feet for a longer trip. This this turbulent area is not going to be a problem for me. So you can tell that at a glance. And now at the bottom, again, at the bottom of that middle section there, it says next. So next is going to show you the synopsis. What's a synopsis? It's a rough idea what the current weather is. So it's going to show you the country, and it shows you the fronts and the highs and the lows and areas of precipitation and so forth. Color-coded if you can't even really zoom in on that. But you get kind of a rough idea where the weather is. Looks like they're having a sporty time of it there up in northern Wisconsin. There's big low pressure there. And then we got some fronts across, what is that, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia maybe? So if you're flying out there, you'd want to spend some time diving into that weather really to see what the weather is at those places. Next, it takes you to the METARs. And this starts with a top-down color view of it. You can see the green spots there at Chino, Ontario. It's probably Cable, Brackett, green spots over there at Orange County, Hemet. Sorry, I learned how to fly when it was Orange County airports, and it'll always be Orange County to me. But if you scroll down here, now we've got the actual textual METAR data for these airports. And again, I like the encoded version like this. I can skip through that real quickly and I can read it. If I wanted to look at the English language version of that, up on the upper right, if you scroll to the top of that, it says plain text off. You can turn that on and it's going to make an attempt to translate it. Here's why I like the encoded version better. Again, each one of those was a single line in the coded METAR version. Now I've got 4, 5, 6 lines of text I have to read through. I'm a slow reader, so it takes me a lot longer to read this than it takes me to read one line. So yeah, a little bit tricky to learn what all these abbreviations were when I was first starting out. But again, you got the color-coded dots on the left there, so that kind of helps read it quickly. And at the bottom of this, you'll see it says next PIREPs. So it's going to take me to the next part of the briefing. And meanwhile, as I'm working down here, if you notice on the very far left, the things below the blue bar is what it's showing me now. The things below that have a little orange dot there. That indicates that I haven't seen that thing yet. I haven't selected it. It hasn't shown it to me. Everything above that doesn't have those dots, so it's already shown me that data. So this is a way to keep tabs on how far you are into the briefing, what you've already looked at, and what you still need to look at.
And by the way, from legal perspective, what you didn't read, they know about it. So if anything happens, they will know exactly how much time you spent on each section, by the way.
Yeah, but they'd have to recover your iPad to know that you looked at this. As you go through this and you investigate each section, it's not telling ForeFlight that you read this. It just knows on my iPad that I've looked at this. So if there's enough of your iPad left, and they can plug it in, turn it on, and do their thumbprint to get into it or whatever, maybe they could figure that out. So mostly what they're looking for is when you read in the accident report that no record of a weather briefing could be obtained, they know you didn't even get anywhere close to this. You didn't ask for the data, so you certainly didn't see the data. And you could have looked at it from another source. You could have gone to weather.com. You could have gone to whatever else. A lot of other sources. So next one is cloud coverage, and again a big map of the place with you can't zoom in on these, so it's a vision test thing. You got to read those, but you got the scale at the bottom left corner there. Basically, the darker the color, the worse things are. So it's a real quick way to look at that. And here in Southern California, it never rains. It's always nice. There's nothing going on here, right? Also notice in that middle column is the time frame. So it's showing me right now the top one, which is at 2100 Zulu. So that's, 1400 this afternoon. You can look at the next forecast, the next one. The bigger ones, as you notice, the top two it says Southwest, and the bottom two it says CONUS, so the whole country, continental United States.
I think you can tap it. Yeah. You can tap the picture.
Oh yeah, you can tap on it as zooms. It wasn't doing that before for some reason. So yeah, you can zoom in on these and you'll see this has got the real old school stuff. How many of you were old enough to remember the old flight service stations with the maps with the circles, symbols at the airports? I used to have one of those. My wife made me throw them out probably 25 years ago or something. But yeah, the circles there with the overcast and broken and so forth. All that information is on there. So when you get one of these briefings, especially if you like this particular form of the briefing, I recommend you scroll through there, especially if you haven't flown for a week or two and the weather's all new, maybe you haven't seen the NOMS for a while. It's a good idea to look through there and make sure what you've got. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I just wanted to show you that this is where you get the big air quotes, scare quotes, legal briefing. So, how do you get an illegal briefing? Well, there's no such thing as an illegal briefing. That's the opposite of legal, though, right? It's basically any other weather data you can find in ForeFlight that's not this one. Anything else is not going to have a record that you got it. So this data is available in lots of places. And I'm going to start from across the toolbar at the bottom there. I'm going to start on the airports page and show you what's available here all the way across. So I like this airports page. I use it a lot when I'm doing flight planning, especially as an IFR pilot. This is where I look at the approaches, the procedures for the airport. And the top section is general data for the airport. It's going to have the TPA in there. It's going to have the frequencies. There's a couple of things in here I really like, especially if it's an airport I'm not familiar with. I like to look at, in the upper right corner, there's 4 little squares there. The lower left one is taxiways. I like to hit the taxiways and just kind of get the lay of the land of the airport, if it's not a place I've flown to. Strictly speaking, this is not weather data, but it's flight data that's going to be important to you if you're flying somewhere you've never been. What I do look at here, though, and suggest that you do too, is the lower right of those 4 buttons where it says comments. If you tap on that, you're going to get 2 different kinds of comments. And the first one, in this left column, these are called remarks. And these are official remarks from the airport sponsor. So the airport manager makes these comments. You can find them in the chart supplement, airport facility directory. This is the official stuff that you need to know. So it's been surveyed through the National Geodetic Survey, whatever. Taxiway Echo has a steep slope. Taxiway India, not visible from tower. This is where you get real good at decoding some of these abbreviations. Some of these abbreviations you can find in some advisory circulars on abbreviations, shortcuts, and that sort of thing. But these are the official remarks from the airport, is the point I want to get across. And that is, as contrasted to the other button up there, the comments, these come from people like you and me. So somebody flew into that airport and saw something that thought it might be useful if we knew, and they put this information in here. You'll see all sorts of stuff there. The credit card reader for the fuel pump is broken. Transient parking is not over there, it's actually over here. A lot of construction. The restaurant was really good. The FBO was horrible. They overcharged me for parking. And you see that one a lot these days. So some of these start to get a little dated. This top one is from 7 months ago. So nobody has flown into Riverside Municipal Airport in the last 7 months and entered a comment. So if you fly into Riverside Airport and got good service or everything was great, maybe make a note, hey, everything's fine. I've even seen some cases where somebody will complain about the fuel pump being out of service, and 2 or 3 days later, the airport manager is jumping in there saying, hey, thanks for that report, I got the pump fixed, everything's good now. So especially if you're making a long trip and you're planning a fuel stop, it's worth doing a little investigation and making sure that the fuel is working there. So that's kind of useful. Now, most of the weather on this page is going to come from that weather tab at the bottom of that top section on the right. And we have a bunch of different things in here. You got the menu section in the lower right quadrant. We're looking at the METAR, which is color-coded. It's green. The weather's nice. In the upper right corner of that is the timestamp. This particular METAR was 37 minutes, or is 37 minutes old. If you're getting this data in flight and you're using ADS-B or XM weather, it'll say that right there. So as it updates when you're flying along through your ADS-B receiver, it's showing you the current modern weather and shows you how old it is. So that's kind of handy. The top portion of that is the encoded METAR. So the stuff that I all know and love, and I don't know if you guys like the encoded version, but you can also scroll down just a little bit and you can see the decoded and everything's all isolated here. So that's kind of nice. Continue scrolling down, you can also look at weather from nearby airports. So you're aiming someplace and maybe the weather doesn't look good, but you want to take a look around at other local airports. It's real easy to do. It's just right there. Just below the METAR is the TAF. This is the official TAF that the FAA likes you to use for flight planning, especially if you're an instrument pilot and you need to consider whether you need an alternate for the airport or whether you can use this airport as an alternate. The TAF is what matters for this. So this is also, it's California, it's green, right? Weather's always nice. Might not be those colors this weekend. I guess we got some weather coming in. So that's the encoded version at the top. And again, you can scroll down and get to the decoded version, more English language. It breaks things down into the time frames. So that's kind of nice with the color-coded business there. That's handy. And I want to introduce you to a section here that I think a lot of pilots aren't super familiar with, is the forecast discussion. How many of you have looked at that? I love the forecast discussion. What the forecast discussion is the human being, the person, the forecaster who created this forecast is talking to you in English about what he thinks about this forecast. I think that's super valuable. So you tap in there and he's going to tell you, okay, and you can scroll up and down in here. It will, when you push the button, it'll take you to the aviation section there. And he's going to speak in English to you. I've seen stuff like, I have a high degree of confidence in the accuracy of this forecast. I've also seen in a dynamic weather situation, he says, I got a moderate to low confidence in this forecast. I think things are changing. I'm not going to make a guarantee it's going to be like this. I saw one, I grabbed a screenshot in December. I think I might have it saved here. It was the forecaster's final forecast after forecasting for 31 years. And he put comments in there that said, hey, thanks people for reading my forecast for 30 years. It's been a really rewarding career. I've loved doing it. Have a good time out there and fly safe. And I just thought that was really cool to see something like that. So that's how you know it's a human being who's telling you a story about what's happening with the weather. So it's not actionable. You can't use that information, but that should be one of the ingredients that helps you build your picture of the environment you're going to be operating in. So if you continue down here, you can see we got a marine layer. So if you're into boating or if you're going to be flying a mission off the coast somewhere, might give you a little bit of information that could help you with that. So that's kind of interesting. And that is completely 180 degrees out of contrast with the next item in the list here, the MOS. Anybody know what an MOS is? Anybody seen the MOS before? Okay, so a couple of you have seen it. It stands for Model Output Statistics. And this is basically a completely computer-generated forecast based on, it takes us a picture of what's happening, what the weather's doing right now, and it's got years now of history of what has happened with the weather. And it says, in the past, when we had weather like this, in a situation like this, here's what happened before. So there's a couple things I like about this. Number one is, well, I don't like the fact that it's not encoded. You get this kind of decoded, separated version, so it takes a little bit longer to get through. But it goes farther out into the future. So this will go 12 p.m. Here we are Thursday. It's going all the way to Friday. We got a little bit of weather moving in there. But we're still VFR. There's a marginal Friday morning. But one of the things I like about this, and your non-flying companion might like knowing this, my wife, likes to know what the temperature is going to be. They forecast that in the MOS. They don't forecast that in a TAF. So, hey, when we get to Riverside tomorrow at noon, we're looking at a temperature of 19 degrees Celsius. That's where it is. Some military airports, if we look back at Riverside at our TAF here, military stations will often forecast. You can see at the bottom of the text in here with your eagle eye vision, it tells you what they're forecasting the altimeter setting is going to be. A civilian forecast doesn't do that. So it's only at military bases. So that's an MOS. And again, this is not something you can use for flight planning. You can't use this to determine whether you need an alternate on an IFR flight or whether the alternate that you're thinking about is going to be acceptable. That's not in here. Any questions on this? Am I going too fast? Nope, I don't see any heads bobbing either. So, The next one is, this is a forecast, ForeFlight feature. This is the daily weather. So each one of these blocks on the right is a day, and it's going to show you what they're seeing for the forecast high and low and percentage chance of rain. It's even got sunrise and sunset on there. So good way to take a look at that and think, well, am I night current? Do I have my landings? Maybe not. I'm going to go get night current on my way home tonight. If you tap on a day, so this goes out a few more days too. It goes out to Friday next week, so about 10 days. So look at that. Saturday, it's showing us a 98% chance of rain. Saturday morning, let's tap on that. And it's going to break it down. Each column is an hour on that day. And it shows you within that hour what kind of cloud cover, what kind of weather conditions, what your ceiling, visibility, wind, and temperature is going to be. 94% chance of rain at 8 o'clock Saturday morning. So if you got some flying in store for Saturday, that might not be the best day to go do it. The good news is they're forecasting a temperature at 12 degrees. What do you think the freezing level is going to be? About 6,000 feet. Yeah, you take the temperature in Celsius divided by 2, that's usually in the standard atmosphere, it's a 2-degree lapse rate per 1,000 feet, right? So divided by 2, and that's probably around where your freezing level is going to be. Personally, I like a freezing level at least 3,000 feet above my MEA. So I make sure I have a little bit of pad between the freezing level and my MEA. So that's the daily. And then the last column in here is the winds. And this is at 1930 PDT, so that's 8 minutes ago. Oh, egads, we're going slow here. Every 3,000 feet on up, you got your temperature, and you see today, well, this is today, right now, so temperature's a little bit warmer. Now we're seeing it's not going to get toward freezing until about 9,000 feet. And the wind up there at 9,000 feet is going to be 327 at 28 knots. Is that magnetic or true? It's true. Back on this METAR, is that magnetic or true? Sorry? Got a true, got a magnetic. Let me pick a different airport here because I'll pick Ontario. Okay, yeah, Ontario. One of the other caveats I meant to tell you is I have the Performance Plus level subscription, the top level subscription in ForeFlight. So on your copy, if you don't have the performance level, I may have some features that I show you that you may not have. One of them is I get digital ATIS on here. So you know when you listen to that ATIS and it's that computer generated voice that's so obnoxious you can't stand listening to it, I get it on my ForeFlight. Here's a METAR. And that METAR says the wind is 240 at 11. We look at the ATIS, and the ATIS says 230 at 11. Why is that different? Comes back to my earlier question, that METAR, is that wind true or magnetic? METAR is true. ATIS is magnetic. Think of it this way, if you hear it, it's magnetic. If you see it, it's true, almost always. And they're 10 degrees different. Well, that's about our variation around here, right? Our magnetic variation is about 12 degrees in this area, 12 to 13 degrees. I looked at one at Seattle, it was about 25 degrees off. So most of the time it's not a big deal, but if you're looking at your METAR, just remember that's 10 degrees off. Most of us, it's not going to be a significant difference in your, say, your crosswind when you're trying to figure out if it's within your crosswind capability. And it's just a little thing to keep in mind. That and $2 gets you a cup of coffee with your employee discount. Okay, moving over to the maps page, there's a ton of weather information on the maps page. Comes in a lot of different forms. Most of it is accessible from the layer selector. The layer selector is in the top left corner. Some people call that a hamburger or a sandwich or whatever. You tap that and it brings up this menu. And in this menu you can see, I'm going to talk mostly about the right-hand column of stuff here. That's all the layers of data that you can put on top of your map. The left column is what kind of map do you want to look at. The right column is what do you want to see over that map. So every so often on this line, you'll see a horizontal line through there. Let me deselect everything here so you can see that. For instance, if you see where it says traffic, there's a line above and below that, and that section above that is weather data that you can depict on the map. Generally speaking, when you're within one of these areas, this box that's delineated by these lines, you can only look at one of those things. If I select one thing in there, so I'm looking at classic radar, if I select something else, it turns off the thing that I was just looking at. So you can't look at two things at once. Kind of a limitation there. It's not always true, but it's usually true. For instance, we come down here to the AirMet SIGMET Center weather advisories. We can also turn on NOTAMs, and we can also turn on TFRs at the same time. So that's an area where with a little bit of an exception. But that top section there, from radar down to hazard advisor, you only get to look at one of those at a time. And it's only going to show you things in that list that you have access to at the moment. So right now, I'm connected to internet. So I get radar and I get radar classic. If I was in my airplane flying along, I have an ADS-B in transponder, I get ADS-B radar, I would see radar ADS-B. If I had an XM receiver, I would see radar XM. So if you want to know what that looks like, let me turn that off here. It's kind of boring radar data right now around here. You got not a lot to look at. Let's put it somewhere that's more exciting. The Northeast always has something exciting. We saw some weather over northern Wisconsin there in the other map. Wait, your internet is slow. Hear that or there's nothing there. It was better this afternoon. Where is everything? Yeah. Okay, it's filling it in. So there's a couple things I really want to point out on this and stress right here. In the very upper left corner is a timestamp. That timestamp is the time that the latest batch of data that it's showing you got to your iPad. So of all the data it's showing me right now, the most recent thing got there at 1935. And right now it's 1943, so 8 minutes ago. That's how old this data is. If you tap on that timestamp, it'll pop another box up. So for instance, let me turn on some traffic and I'll turn on NOTAMs. So now we see our timestamp and it says internet traffic just below that. If you're in your airplane, you have ADS-B, it'll show you ADS-B traffic. You tap on that, and now it shows me how old is this radar data? How old is the traffic data? How old is the NOTAM data? And they all have different times on them. So the traffic is right now, it's 1944, that's the timestamp I have. Radar is 1935, so it's 9 minutes old. Here's your takeaway, 9 minutes old for that radar data. And remember, that's the time that data got to your airplane, got to my iPad. It took some time to gather that data and assemble that data and massage the data and package the data and distribute the data to you. So that time varies. If there's not much going on, it's pretty quick. But if you're in a dynamic weather system like we see up there north of Michigan, that's more complex weather. It takes more processing to get, so it's even worse. That delay can be upwards of 20 minutes. So, and that's from 20 minutes before that timestamp that we saw in the upper left corner. That we got that data in 1935, and it took maybe 20 minutes to get that. That data could be as much as 30 minutes old. So don't fly your airplane through a weather system based on this radar data. About once a year, we see an airplane that flies through some gap in there. When they're looking at this, it looks like a gap. You know, maybe it looks not too bad to fly through here, but that weather's half an hour old. This thing is moving, and it turns out that they were actually, if you look real time at the weather, they were actually in the worst part of the weather. I think that's probably what killed Scott Crossfield about 15 years ago. It was about that same situation. So this is a strategic planning tool only, not a tactical weather penetration system. The only thing that will do that is an onboard weather radar system. And if you get one of those, if you've never flown with one, you need to get with an instructor who understands how they work, because there are some tricks to working it. We've got automatic radars on the jets now, and I'm the only guy I've ever seen who takes it out of the automatic mode and puts it in manual mode to tweak it and see what's really going on. You have to know how the system's working. Tilt and gain, really important. I put mine in super scary mode with 3 clicks up on the gain, and I'm seeing everything. My co-pilot's looking at mine, and they're turning white because theirs doesn't show anything. Well, how come yours looks so bad? Yep. And I learned how to work radar, but my first airline was Air Midwest. We flew Metroliners out of Kansas City, all across Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, Oklahoma. We had weather out there. We got really good training on how radar works. So the training I got on radar at that airline in 1985 was way better than anything I've gotten at the major since '87. So what you can do with this, though, this is history, shows you what happened however long ago it was. At the bottom you can see this little bar, gray bar. It's got that timeline with that blue dot. You can put that blue dot somewhere and look at what the radar showed at 1910. So you can scroll around and move it. You can also, at the far left of the bar is that little triangle. You can hit that play button and it'll show you where it's moving. This is where it's great. You can see the trend of motion of this system. So you can see where it's been. You can get a good idea where you think it's going. And let me see if we have one of these in here. Yeah, let me pause this somewhere. You can see mixed in throughout here are these little balls with arrows on them. And that's an indication of which direction that particular section of the storm is moving. So you see them, if you watch it in play, you can see them moving around quite a lot. You can see them longer. If you have a long enough stretch, you get a longer bar with 4 bars on it, 4 little circles on it. That's where it's going to be in 20 minutes, or where it was 20 minutes ago, 40 minutes ago, and an hour ago. So you can get an idea how fast it's moving and project that out into the future. So you can see, it's still, it's grabbing brand new data. So this data, now we just got this, and it says 1940, so 8 minutes ago. So if you didn't think that weather was old, there's your proof right there. Brand new data just came up hot off the press. We zoom in here, those are TFRs. Sometimes you'll see, here's one. Unfortunately, when you make that bigger, trying to find it, those things don't stay big. Each of the little icons shrinks back down to normal size. But this little section right here, the spinny thing on it, that's mesocyclone movement in that storm. So the Doppler radar has shot that storm, and it sees things moving. And when one shot of this radar, it sees some things moving that way and some parts of it moving this way. So it knows there's rotation going on in that. Maybe not necessarily enough to be a tornado, but it could be. The numbers here, 200, both these cases, 250 right here. That's the altitude of the top of that moisture return that it saw, 25,000 feet, 20,000 feet. So I personally don't like, in my little airplane, I don't like tangling with anything that's above about 25,000, depending on a couple other factors. If the top there is showing it's at 35,000 and I'm in my jet, I want to be at least at 40 over the top of it. And I'm afraid of heights. I don't like going to 40 anyway. The other problem is that's the altitude of the top of the radar return. There could be cloud above that it's not enough to sense. It only senses it if it's dense enough to have some actual moisture there.
Could be ice.
It could be ice. And ice doesn't really record very well on radar. It's uneven edges. It tends to scatter the return a little bit much, and hail also. So there's a bunch of different things that will show up in these things. And we don't have time to dive into everything. I just wanted to show you what that looks like. But what I do want to show you is, most of the time, you probably see this on some of yours, just above this play bar is a legend. It sits right there. And you can turn that on and off. I like it off because that's more real estate that I can use for looking at my map. And this is down here, the map legend, right in the middle of this. You turn that on, it turns our little legend on. Now we get the color coding. Basically, I know that anything that's a darker color is worse than something that's a lighter color. So I don't need the legend there. I take it off so I can look at it. But what I want to show you here is, even within just these 2 radar layers, right here we have radar, standard radar, and we have classic radar. You'll see if I select the other layer, that legend is going to change. The color coding is different. Sorry, that one. So there's your classic radar, there's your standard radar, slightly different. If you have ADS-B radar, it's different again. If you have XM satellite radar, that's different again. So the color codes are slightly different, but frankly, I'm not often tangling with anything beyond the lightest shade of yellow. And then only under certain circumstances I'll talk about in a second. The other thing that can change that is back in our settings menu here, we can scroll down here just a little bit, and we turn on 4-color radar. So look at our weather we have there just to the right side of that menu. That's what it looks like with 4-color radar turned off. If we turn it on, it kind of simplifies that. But our legend at the bottom changed, so it's context sensitive to whatever we have selected. It's going to show you a legend, obviously, that matches what you're seeing. So I just wanted to show you that those are different. When you're looking at radar in flight, ADS-B radar, ForeFlight does an automatic mixing of CONUS radar versus regional radar data. If you have something like a Garmin 430, 530, or a GTN, I don't know the map display on the G1000 if it'll do radar. You can select whether you're looking at regional or CONUS. ForeFlight blends the two together. And the difference is regional radar data for ADS-B is around your airplane, usually about 300 miles, give or take, around your airplane. It's updated more quickly, and it's smaller pixels. So because it's near you, you care more about that data than something that's CONUS, it's on the other side of the country. It's bigger pixels and it updates more slowly. So it's the contrast of the two. Now if we have time, I got a screenshot I'll show you. So I would encourage you to play with these menus on here. Here's an icing display. One of the things I note is, okay, I'm looking at a sectional chart. My base map is a sectional chart, and I've got this radar display, and you can see the Great Lakes around there and some of that airspace and stuff, but it's hard to get a really good picture for where that stuff is. So here's the trick I do. I turn the sectional map off, and now my base layer is just the country with the state lines around it. So sometimes that helps me put things in context a little bit better when I'm looking at some complex radar. So you might try that. Again, I got the legend turned on so you can see our icing coding here. We got light, moderate, and severe. Again, the darker it is, the worse it is. So that's a good rule of thumb to use. Let's see, if you're in flight and you have ADS-B, I don't know whether it's available on XM. One of the menu options in here is going to be cloud tops. That's the only place I know of to see cloud tops. They're not available in any graphic form anywhere else that I know of. So I don't know why that is. Obviously, the data's available because you're seeing it in flight. Why can't I look at it on the ground? I haven't gotten a good answer for that. So we can scroll down here. The time, wind speeds, I want to show you this. It's kind of cool. If you remember the old Windy website, that's kind of cool, very mesmerizing. Some of the pictures I had in the slideshow there were the Citizen of the World that just did a flight a couple years ago to the South Pole and then to the North Pole. I was his weather guy. This was the closest thing I could find for wind data for him to use for the flight down to the South Pole. There was just almost nothing available. And so I kind of used this and looked at it and said, well, okay, I think it's going to be better if you go this way. And he ended up going a different way anyway. But this is the only way I could find it. It's showing me the wind at whatever altitude is on the right-hand side there. It says 18,000. 18,000 roughly is the 500 millibar level. That's the midpoint of the atmosphere. And so you look at that, it's easy to get a good idea of where the big weather trends are. And the color coding across the map is the speed zone, and that matches the legend I have at the bottom. So also the time bar at the bottom, that's the current time where the blue dot is right now. I can project this out 12 hours from now, let's say, and this is what the winds are going to be doing in 12 hours. So that's kind of handy too. One of the others here, I rue the day I ever showed this to my wife, the turbulence one. She does not like flying in turbulence. So if she's looking at this and sees anything more than, if we were going to fly to Tucson today, she'd look at that and say, no, I'm not going. I'm going, hey, surf's up, let's go. So that's the layers in the top part of there. We got AirMets, SIGMETs, and CWA, Center Weather Advisories. I toured LA Center a couple of months ago, and they have a meteorologist who's full-time on staff in the LA Center facility, in every center facility. And that's the person who creates a Center Weather Advisory. So they watch the weather coming in. That happened to be, the day I was there was an interesting weather day. And They were issuing center weather advisories on a regular basis. The other SIGMETs and AIRMETs come out of the National Weather Service. Center weather advisories comes out of the ATC Center. So that's the difference there. When I selected that layer, we got a little menu selector bar just above the legend. You can look at icing, turbulence high, turbulence low, IFR, and thunderstorm. Turn each one on, and you can see the areas where we got possible ice, high altitude turbulence, low altitude turbulence. So there's again, my wife's not going to like going. Yeah, Tucson might barely be okay. IFR, so visibility is low and ceiling's low. And that's what we've got there. NOTAMs, TFRs. So flight category. This takes the airports around there and color codes them. Just like the color coding we saw before. Green's good, yellow's less good, red's IFR, purple's low IFR. And if you zoom in, you see more airports. They don't clutter the screen with too much stuff. Question mark means it doesn't have enough data available. So you could have a ceiling or visibility element of your METARs missing. Surface wind, little barbs, winds aloft barbs. And these barbs in this winds aloft version, they don't move like the ones in the other layer we saw. You can set your altitude here. So play around with that, get your big picture. Dew point spread. The difference between dew point and temperature. We all know if you got these numbers are close together, there's a lot of moisture in the air. You could be a low visibility situation. They color code it. Green is good, orange is less good. And let's see, we had some sporty weather up here. I don't see anything that's, we got some zeros. Yeah, so there's some nice weather across what they call Appalachia, I guess. Appalachia. Temperature, visibility. That's should be pretty self-explanatory. But the most important element of this chart, though, when I'm planning a flight long distance, is that fuel 100 low level. That's what I want to know. Fly to the green. Why would you go to the red when you got a green airport right next to it? So they're in that eastern Kentucky. You got a 649, you got a 540 right next door. So let me think. I'm going to $1 a gallon cheaper for fuel? You bet, I'm in. If you're going to Texas for the eclipse, you can put on a custom content layer. So that happens to be where the eclipse is going in 2 weeks from yesterday. If you've never seen a total eclipse of the sun, I highly recommend it. I went to Wyoming for the one a couple years ago. Closest thing I've had in a long time to a religious experience. You really should go see one once. They're amazing. So that's a quick overview on the maps page. I want to go over to probably, I think, one of the most underappreciated sources of weather in ForeFlight is the imagery tab. And this one is divided into the left side is your selector, and the right one is within that selection which maps are available. There are featured maps of flight category 1. This is a broad picture of the country. Yellow is marginal. Red is IFR weather. You can see the fronts and the highs and lows. The next chart in this group is a surface analysis. That's what the weather is doing right now. You can't analyze something that hasn't happened yet. So analysis is what's there now or recently passed. The next one after that is this is another version of a surface analysis. And this is the weather that, let's see, this is 8 a.m. Eastern Time Tuesday, so that's this morning. And again, you got the key on the left-hand side. If you don't, doesn't matter if you don't know what the colors and the hashes and everything are in the main part of the map. You got a legend there in the lower left. And we got prog charts, prognosis. So this always starts. The first one in this list is your surface analysis. That's what's going on right now. So you can see, oh yeah, we got a mix. We got stationary fronts, we got occluded fronts, warms and colds, dry lines, we got it all going on. The next one after that is a forecast. This is a prognostic chart, prog chart for short. And if you zoom in on the bottom of this, the most important thing there to me is the third line there. It says valid at 0600 Zulu on Wednesday. So this is 10 o'clock tonight, about 2 hours from now. And it's got the forecaster's name, that person who made the TAF made this chart. And if you're a real stalker, you can start to figure out who does these charts, and then hey, what's that name? Kabidi made that chart. He's good. I don't know who that one is. They made good charts. And you can scroll these through, just keep sliding through. You see it more and more in the future. And again, if you don't know what the colors are on there, on the left side is the legend. This is Wednesday morning. It's weird, these things kind of overlap sometimes. This one is valid 0600 Zulu Wednesday morning. This one's 12 Zulu, 1800 Zulu, 00. So these are actually, here's 12 Zulu Thursday. They don't put all these charts out at the same time. They kind of overlap. So you get some leapfrogging, and sometimes you'll scroll to the next chart and it's actually valid for an earlier time. So keep an eye on that valid time. That's the most important thing on that chart, I think. And that looks like we're going to be having some interesting weather up there in Washington, Oregon, Idaho, that area. We got a quantity of precipitation. So here's how much rain is going to fall. You see the scale on the left. Again, the darker the color, the worse it is. Here's a 6-hour quantity for the next slot. So here you can start to see this weather system that's going to move in our direction over the weekend. This is still Tuesday morning. We scroll forward a bunch. Thursday morning now. Just flip through this stuff. That was quantity of precipitation. This is probability of precipitation. And again, you can look at the map. You can see where we got looks like in northwestern Colorado there, about a 44% chance of rain, of some kind of precipitation. We've got outlook charts, we've got convective outlooks, convective forecasts. I'm not an expert on all these things, but I just want you to know that they're here. Here's your cloud report. These are the graphical aviation forecasts. A couple years ago, they did away with area forecasts. If you're going to an airport, you would look for the terminal area forecast for that airport. If there wasn't a terminal area forecast, you'd look for the area forecast. Well, they did away with area forecasts. Now we've got graphical area forecasts. That's what this is. So if I'm doing a flight tomorrow morning, let's say, and I'm going up to the Northern California coast, I'm looking at 300 to 500 feet overcast with tops to 30 and 45. Not too good. I'm probably not going to make it in there. Cirrus above that. And I'm not talking Cirrus airplanes above that. I'm talking Cirrus clouds. So this now, if you're flying to an airport without a TAF, this is where you get your cloud and visibility information to decide whether you need an alternate for that airport. You can also zoom in on your region. Here's our southwest cloud. So this is California, Arizona. You can see the area there. So pretty decent weather until you get into Arizona. But even that, you can see these are few at 12, overcast 13. So these are high clouds. If I'm flying my little airplane to Phoenix or Tucson or something like that, it's probably not going to be too bad. Then we got winds aloft, 5,000 to 18,000. If I look, say I'm going to fly at 10,000 feet tomorrow morning. So I picked the FL100, 12 hours from now. That's what I'm looking at. So kind of big picture weather stuff. Graphical air mets, we got our different types of air mets. Here's the Sierra, which is, this is mountain obscuration, I believe. Somebody correct me if I got that wrong. Icing probability, anybody fly an icing capable airplane in here? I'm not going to spend any time on that then. So that's the imagery tab. We've already looked at the flights, which is where we get our weather briefing from. And that is all the data that I have in here. So a couple of documents. I'm a big believer in documents, the documents feature in ForeFlight. I just did a check ride last week for the chief instructor program. I had 3 FAA inspectors, and every one of the documents that I used in that check ride, the oral portion of that check ride, was in ForeFlight. He's never seen anybody do that. He said, but it's obvious you know where these things are, you know how to use them, you know how to find stuff. So he was good with that. I'm a big believer in it. And you can sort these things out. I have a file down here for weather briefings. These are some documents that you should have on board your iPad. The first two, A1 ForeFlight Mobile Pilot's Guide, this is the instruction book for all of ForeFlight. That's one you probably ought to have. The one next to that is A4 ForeFlight Legends. So if you're wondering what any icon, any color scheme, anything is in any of ForeFlight, it's in that document. You open that up, So for instance, here's your turbulence stuff. I happen to be looking at this. Internet turbulence is depicted differently than Sirius XM turbulence. Freezing levels, colors, here's your surface visibility. They're all in here. Here's the eddy dissipation rate. So if you don't know what this indication of turbulence are, is you can look at your type of aircraft. You see an EDR of about 20 in a light airplane, it's going to be light chop. In a big airplane, it's going to be nothing. You don't even feel it. So that's what that means. You can make bookmarks in here. I've got a bunch of bookmarks. I don't have any bookmarks in this one. But for instance, we got weather legends, radar symbols. So it tells you what all these, I was just telling you a little bit ago about the little arrows and the numbers. This is where you go to find out what anything in this chart means. So you don't have to go to the internet, to a Facebook or anything to ask these questions. You've got it right here on your iPad. There's that mesocyclone deal. And there's text in there if you want to read it. Large column of rotating air, that's what a mesocyclone is. So I believe it's really important to have these documents loaded. If you want to know how weather works, or how the weather information that we get as pilots works, that's in that last thing there. This was just modified about a year and a half or so ago. They took two different advisory circulars that one of them talked about how weather works and the other one talked about aviation weather services. They combined them into one handbook, and this is it. So this is available for free in ForeFlight. If you printed it out, it's how many pages? It's 500 pages. So it'd be a pretty thick book, but you can get it in ForeFlight. I keep adding this stuff into my ForeFlight, and the iPad never gets any heavier. It's the same size and weight it was before, but it's got all this data in there. There's a bunch of other stuff. Like I say, I've got advisory circulars. Here's the two advisory circulars that used to talk about weather. These are soon to be expired. This one is aviation weather. How does weather work? This is now rolled into that other handbook I just showed you. You can, if you're looking for these books, you scroll down here in the catalog. Some of them are in ForeFlight. These are all the manuals that ForeFlight puts out on how the app works. So if you're wondering about how to do anything, they've got a separate book on logbooks, separate one on weight and balance, on performance. All that stuff is in here. You guys probably ought to look at the search and rescue guide. That probably ties into what you guys do if you're not already familiar with this document. Scrolling down here, light gun signals. They just published this one. Brian Schiff and I were just talking about this yesterday. The Sun and Fun. The NOTAM for Sun and Fun is in here for free from ForeFlight. Also, the one for Oshkosh will come out usually about late May, early June. That's out. If you have a Stratus that you use for your ADS-B radar or weather data on board, they got the instruction manuals on how to work them. That's right there. If you're looking for anything from the FAA, that's all in here. So there's that AC in the upper left there I was telling you about weather. You want to, if you ever have to call anybody up on a phone to file a flight plan, who would ever do that? We all use ForeFlight, right? But you need a flight plan form. Well, that's the form. It's available in here for free. Scroll down here a little bit more. Here's your chart supplement folder. If you need a chart supplement, you need your airport data, all the chart supplements are available right here. If you're an IFR pilot and you fly tech routes, there's a separate document that has just the tech routing is right here. So this is the official stuff from the FAA on how tech routes work. Great stuff. Of course, I'm easily amused. So FARs. If you're a pilot, and I think most of us are, you should have at least Part 61 and Part 91 in here. If you own an airplane or operate an airplane, Civil Air Patrol operates airplanes, you should be familiar with Part 43. If you hold a medical certificate, you should probably be familiar with Part 67. There's a whole bunch of parts in here. They're all free. So you can download these things officially from the FAA. Also, you can add any PDF file you can find on the internet for anything. As an example, I have a folder here that I use for some of the airplanes I fly. Here's the one for my airplane. I found the service manual for a Cessna 182. I download that into ForeFlight. So when I'm on the road, if something breaks on my airplane, I've got all the documentation I need right there to fix it. I've even got the illustrated parts catalog. I've got I have the pilot manuals for all the hardware installed on my airplane. All the GPS receivers, autopilots, everything's right in there. Let's see, Redbird simulator manuals. I teach in a Redbird over at Fullerton. I got that in here. I do a lot of teaching in Moonies, so I got different owner manuals from different years of Mooney are in there. Whatever you want, you can put it in here. So I use that a lot. And that is about all I've got, and I'm a little over time here, I think, Andre. Any questions? Any way that you guys do things better or different than what I just showed you? So my general technique when I'm planning a flight is I start on the maps page, and I will put my route in here. Let's say we're flying from Riverside to Santa Barbara. I put that in here. Maybe I'll look at the available routes and I'll, okay, do I like that one? The Ontario Papa 16, that's a tech route. Yeah, that'll work. So I'll select that route. Maybe I'm going to do it at, I'll say 6,000 feet. This is my altitude selector. I can look at it. It knows what the winds are at all these altitudes, and it tells me how much headwind I'm going to have, how long it's going to take, and how much fuel I'm going to burn depending on altitude. So I can take a quick look at that and say, okay, 6,000 feet, it's going to take me 55 minutes. I'm going to burn 16 gallons. I put over here time of departure. I'm going to leave now. And then on the kind of the right-hand third of this flight plan door is that little box with the arrow. That's, I call it the send to button. Tap that and send that to flights. It takes me over to here, and it's filled in all this data. Now I look at the briefing. It goes and gets a briefing for this flight. And I think I've got the longer format briefing selected right now. We'll find out in a second. Yeah, that's the longer form briefing. To change to the shorter briefing, if you go to More, Settings, and scroll down here to Flights, Briefing Format is graphical HTML. I'm going to change that to graphical PDF. It's a little bit quicker briefing. When you change that, you need to come back here and refresh this page and then click Briefing. It downloads the briefing. It looks like it's kind of stuck. And it's going to present me with all that weather data that I just told it I wanted. So that's how I get a weather briefing. Now I've looked at this briefing and I look at the destination weather up there at Santa Barbara. Okay, do I need to have an alternate if I'm flying IFR on this flight? It's green. It's better than 2003. It looks good. What if, I'll throw a curveball at you. What if I wasn't flying to Santa Barbara? Let's say I was flying to Oceano. Can I fly IFR to Oceano? If we look at Oceano, come over here to airports. I like the Maps Flights tab. I look at Oceano, procedure. There's no instrument approaches. Can I fly IFR there? Sure you can. You can file IFR there. What do you have to do? Nope. Maintain what? Yeah, but what when I file this flight plan, what information do I need to include in the flight plan? If I'm going to a non-IFR airport, I must have an alternate, regardless of the weather. So if I send this route now over to flights, they have an alternate advisor. We got our departure, destination, and alternate. So if you tap in there, it says, okay, you're going there. It's going to look at local airports, and it's going to make some suggestions for me. What airports might work as an alternate? It's going to suggest San Luis Obispo. San Luis Obispo is, it's 6 miles away. It's going to take me 4 minutes to fly there. It's got an ILS, a VOR, a localizer, and an RNAV approach. That sounds pretty good. It's got everything I want. Okay, so I'm going to select Santa Barbara as my alternate. So quickly, that's one of my favorite questions to ask when I'm doing an IPC. Can I file IFR to Oceano? Most people don't realize you can. So you just have to have an alternate. All right, what do you got for questions? Now you're experts on ForeFlight weather, right? Nice, my work is done.
I always start at 18,000 feet. I either work up or I work down. And that's kind of the middle. It will give you where the troughs are, and you can plan accordingly if you're going to be below that.
Yeah, so let's look at that. Here's our, if we start with where's my winds aloft? We mentioned that a little bit ago. 18,000 is halfway through. Wind's a lot. So 5,000 to 18,000. And we look at this chart. Oh, sorry. Picked the wrong thing. You have to look at the altitude on it. They start out down low at 5,000 feet and they go up to 18. So if you look at the 18,000 foot chart for 24 hours from now, that's the midpoint in the atmosphere. This is kind of where the main, biggest parts of the weather systems are moving through this altitude. And you get a yeah, usually the bottom jet stream, depending on season and what's going on. Northern latitudes, it tends to be lower. Closer to the equator, it tends to be higher. But yeah, the upper 20s is usually around the bottom of the jet stream. You might see it here right now, not too much. But that's a midpoint of the atmosphere. That's a 500 millibar chart, and that's why that one's so important to all the meteorologists, for sure. Well, that's all I know about weather. You've exhausted my knowledge, so thank you very much for your attention. Let me show you.
David, do we have any questions on YouTube?
I don't have any.
What I do want to show you is for a year now, my friend Brian Schiff and I have been hosting a monthly ForeFlight workshop series. It's at 5 o'clock Pacific time. If you scan that QR code, it'll take you to a website. You can sign up for it. We start about 5 o'clock. We aimed for it to be about an hour and a half. I don't think we've ever finished it in under 2. We always pick something different and we dive into some aspect of it. We recorded all of them. They're all available on his website at ForeFlightWorkshops.com. So take a look at that. Our next one will be next Monday night, and we're going to be planning a trip into Sun and Fun because that's the following week. So it seems like the right time to do it. We'll also talk about the eclipse a little bit. And the next thing I want to mention is I'm teaching an all-day ForeFlight, and I call it an all-day sucker, for the 99s at Orange County Airport on Saturday, April 13th. And there is a QR code to sign up for that one. This is for the 99s. We'll start at 9 in the morning, go till about 4 in the afternoon. It's a fundraiser for them for their scholarship programs. A little tricky to fly into it because Orange County doesn't really seem to like GA very much anymore. Sorry to say. But this will take you to their registration website for this event in about a week and a half or 2 weeks. About 2 weeks. So that now is all I've got.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
So, I disconnect then?
Yes.
All right. Boo! And they're all crashing out there because they just lost their display. And I return the program over to your previously scheduled CAP meeting, already in progress. Okay, thanks, Andre.
Thank you very
You're welcome.
Okay, the meeting is over. Thank you everybody for attending, and if you have any questions, you're welcome to address to CP members or to Mike while he's still here.